Okay, this question's got us working out a budget here. Scenario is that Simon is an apprentice builder. He's got a fortnightly wage of $1,150. We have to sort out his income and expenditure and put it in a budget-like table. So, first thing is his income is entirely made up of that wage, $1,150. But we're being asked to prepare a weekly budget. Now that's a fortnightly amount. So we have to, with all of these things, convert them firstly into weekly amounts. That's why here we've got 1,150 per fortnight, but we divide it by 2 to get the weekly amount. All the rest of the things here are expenses. So the first one is rent. He pays $600 a fortnight in total for it, but that's shared amongst 3 people. So we're going to get that 600, divide it by 3, so that'll be 200 each per fortnight, but then we're going to want to divide it by 2 to get a weekly amount. So 200 divided by 2 equals $100 each week Simon will have to allow for his rent. Food. The food budget is $250 per week. It's already in a weekly amount, but we're still going to divide that one by 3 because they're going to share that amongst the 3 of them. I'll do all my calculations in a minute, and for the moment we'll just put down our workings in this column. So there's a power bill. Now this one's a little bit tricky because we're told that the power bill is going to be $350 per quarter. It's probably best if we multiply it by 4 to get a yearly amount, and then divide it by 52. That'll give a weekly amount, but that's shared amongst 3 people. So that we are going to need to divide by 3 to end up with a weekly amount for Simon. The phone's also a little bit tricky. His phone bill, he's got this on a phone plan, and it costs him $62 a month. Now you would think it'd be fair enough just to divide that by 4, and you would probably be pretty right. You get a good estimate, but it wouldn't be exactly right. You see, there's not quite, well, there's a little bit more than 4 weeks in a month. To get the best estimate of how much the phone's actually going to cost him, $62 a month, if we multiply that by 12, that will give us a yearly amount, and then divide it by 52, because there's 52 weeks in a year. That will give us Simon's weekly amount that he should allow for his phone. We've got some car registration and insurance and petrol to allow for. $380 a year is his registration. That's a yearly amount. Divide by 52. Insurance, $420 a year. Divide by 52 to get a weekly amount. Petrol is already a weekly amount, $35 a week. We can pop that straight across here. Education expenses, $620 for a whole year. Divide by 52 to get a weekly amount. Clothing is $200 a year. Divide by 52. And entertainment is already presented as a weekly amount. I'll put it over here. Now, I'm just going to pause the recording for a moment. You might like to work these out and see if you can come up with Simon's total expenditure for the year. Well, how did you go? I did some calculations and I came up with a total weekly amount of expenses of $323.95. Now, Simon's income for the week is $575. So he's in a good situation because his income exceeds expenditure. It's what we call a surplus budget. If you take away the $323.95 from what he earns, he'll have a weekly surplus of $251.05. If it was the other way round and his budget showed that he was expending more than he was earning, that would be what we would call a deficit budget. The last thing that we have to do is go through the expenditure items on Simon's budget and classify them as either being fixed expenses or discretionary expenses. Now, fixed expense is one which he's committed to, which he can't do anything about, whereas a discretionary one is one where if he was to tighten his purse strings a little, he could possibly make savings on it. Now, for instance, rent is a good example of what we would call a fixed expense. Put F for fixed, because that he must pay it every week and there's nothing that he can do about the amount. Whereas food, well, I suppose if they went without a few luxury items or something like that, they could make some possible savings on food. That makes it a discretionary item. Power's a tricky one because there's a line charge that goes on with power which is definitely fixed. Though the rest of the power, though, it could be viewed as discretionary because you could use less power if you wanted. If you went around turning appliances off, you could make some savings there. So we'll put down discretionary because there is a discretionary component to power. The phone, it's a phone contract type arrangement that he's got here, and he must pay that $62 a month, so we'll call that a fixed expense that he's got. Car registration and insurance are both fixed. There's nothing that he can do to control the amounts, but whereas petrol, if he travels less distance, he'll use less fuel. That makes it a discretionary item. I'm assuming that his education there are things like course fees and stuff like that, so they would be fixed expenses. Clothing would be discretionary. You can spend more or less on it. I would suggest he's spending $200 a year is a very small amount in any case, but it's still a discretionary item, as is entertainment. You could spend more or less on that if you wished. We'll finish that one there.